Now, the government's announced the early closure of one of George Osborne's flagship schemes to get people onto the housing ladder. The Help to Buy mortgage guarantee scheme for England and Wales is being brought to a close 6 months early. The government says the scheme's achieved its goal, although it's also being seen as another break from the Cameron era. Chancellor Philip Hammond has said he'll close the Help to Buy scheme, which offered state-backed mortgages to those who could only afford a 5% deposit. The scheme helped 185,000 people, but has been criticised for pushing up house prices while doing nothing to address the underlying shortage of properties. Latest figures from the government's house price index show the average cost of a home is now £214,000. That's a full £63,000 more than a decade ago. Meanwhile, the London Mayor Sadiq Khan has ordered an inquiry into the scale and impact of foreign investment in the capital's housing market. He's called for more transparency, warning that a flood of dirty money from abroad is causing real concerns for people struggling to get onto the housing ladder. A survey by the Institute for Fiscal Studies today shows that people born in the early 1980s are only half as wealthy as those born the decade before were at the same age. Just 40% of those born in the 1980s are owner-occupiers at the age of 30. That's compared with at least 55% in previous generations. Well, we're joined now by the head of policy at housing charity Shelter, Kate Webb. Welcome to the programme. Hello, Kate. Shelter gave plans for Help to Buy a cautious welcome, didn't they, when they were announced in 2013? Do you support its scrappage today?
I think really many people aren't going to notice that it's gone. When it was
Really?
when it was first launched, it was plugging a kind of a gap in the market where those very low deposit loans that lots of people used in sort of the noughties and the 90s to buy had really dried up in the wake of the recession. And what this Help to Buy scheme was trying to do was replicate those. The market's sort of providing those again, but I think also people have realised that with house prices where they are and incomes where they are, it's not so much the deposit that's actually the issue anymore. It's the whole affordability picture.
But it was expected to generate 74,000 sales when it was launched and, in fact, more than doubled that. So it does seem to be working for a lot of people.
I think it did work for a time for a lot of people. If you look at numbers since, it has really dwindled. And I think certainly we're not concerned about the fact that it's going to be withdrawn. What we are concerned about is the fact that the piece of the puzzle which was always missing, which is a big emphasis on building genuinely affordable homes, still isn't on the table. And I think certainly we'll be looking to the Prime Minister next week to really set out her plans about what she's going to do for families on low and middle incomes, as well as some of the more kind of affluent people who took advantage of Help to Buy.
Conservatives have pledged to build 1 million homes, haven't they? As has Jeremy Corbyn. He said 1 million homes would be built in 5 years, 500,000 of them council homes. The question is affordability and house prices being pushed up and putting it out of the realm of an awful lot of people.
Exactly. I think people have frankly got a little bit kind of cynical about these big numbers that are being announced, because the fact is people see homes going up in their area and they know that if they're on an ordinary wage, they do not have a hope of buying it if it's a full market sale. And that's actually why the Mayor's announcement is so interesting, because people have really got cynical about the fact that they can't afford anything. And that's why when the Prime Minister puts a bit more flesh on those plans to build 1 million homes, we really need to see some more diversity of what's being built. Genuinely low rent homes for people who can't afford a mortgage, and also products like shared ownership. It can't just be about expensive market homes.
You mentioned Sadiq Khan, the London Mayor. Do you think he's right then to worry about what he calls dirty money coming into London through foreign ownership schemes?
I think there's a lot going on in London and no one's quite got a handle of what it is so far. You know, I don't think actually as many homes are being left empty as some people suspect, but certainly it's not helping people who live and work in London find a home when you have kind of foreign money pouring in, propping up what is potentially an unsustainable bubble, and building these very, very expensive luxury apartments.
Barbara, do you think the Help to Buy scheme, in essence, was a good scheme?
I think that the Help to Buy scheme was questionable at first because, like was said, you know, it didn't fulfill the needs that people had, which is there wasn't enough houses being built that people could afford. I think what's happened is the Conservatives have tried something, it's not quite work, and people have criticised it, and instead of fixing it, they've decided to completely take it away, and we're still going to have the problem of people not being able to afford houses.
It was due to come to an end next year.
And that was the bit that genuinely upsets me, because there's no growing in that, there's no improving in that, there's not actually solving the reality of people's problems of not being able to afford houses and wages being so low. It's a two-tier thing, and now they're going to completely take it away. We don't quite know what they're going to replace it with. I mean, they've committed to build houses, but we have to wait and see on that, because the Conservatives say one thing and do another.
Tim, do you think the Help to Buy scheme will be remembered as a successful government intervention, or maybe a naive move that actually boosted the housing bubble?
I think it was probably very good politics. I think it sent a message to people who wanted to buy a home and couldn't afford it that government was helping them. But the problem we have fundamentally in Britain, this is where I completely agree with Shelter and I think with the Labour Party, is we're just not building enough affordable housing.
Successive governments have said we need to build more houses. They have not got a grip. Why?
Well, I think partly there's ideological reasons on the part of the Conservative Party. I think in the 90s cover that tradition. At the moment, we're spending about £10 billion on housing benefit. So government is involved in the housing market. That money could actually be spent not on benefits, but on bricks, building affordable homes for people. And so I think it's probably a forlorn hope, but I do hope that this week in Birmingham we might see a real shift in Conservative policy in this. Not away from the greatest traditions of conservatism of the post-war, just away from where we got to in the 1980s and 1990s.
Kate Webb, if you were Housing Minister, I bet you'd love to be, wouldn't you? You'd love to get your hands on that department. What would your top policies be? What would the priority be right now?
I think the priority is about building the genuinely affordable homes. As Tim says, you know, that we do have a great tradition in this country of actually building homes for people on low and middle incomes, rather than just fixating on numbers. So first of all...
And is it home ownership or social housing and council housing? Different schemes,
I think it's about getting away with that obsession with tenures, and also remembering that the great thing about if you build council housing is we do have the right to buy. It's incredibly controversial, yes, but it does mean that if you have someone in a council home, it can work for them when their income is low, and if their income increases, they can then exercise the right to buy. So we don't have to see it as an either-or. OK, Barbara, of course, right to buy has now been extended under the new legislation from council houses into housing associations as well. What do you make of that?
I think it, again, does not solve the problem of we don't have enough houses and people are on low income. I think that is the key issue here. Whether you extend them to housing associations or not, we need to physically build more houses for people to live in. And like myself, I just recently graduated, and the idea of owning a home is just not on my, because it's just, I don't think it's anything I'm going to be able to afford. And even genuinely just living in London, we talk about housing and stuff, but renting in London is also another way that, you know, young people and people generally, especially people low income, get exploited when you have big businesses coming in buying up all the properties. People have to either move out, or, you know, you have overcrowding, especially for black communities, which is where I'm from. You have massive overcrowding in our communities because we are not able to afford houses, and people don't want to move anywhere because this is where their community are. So I think whether you extend it to housing associations or, you know, we have another scheme of buy-to-let, I think, again, as Shelter has said, the main issue is to build houses for people. And
so, Kate Webb, do you think that Jeremy Corbyn has got a grip on this? If he's talking about 1 million homes in 5 years, council homes being built as well, 500,000, and also giving councils the right to borrow against council houses asset-wise to build even more.
I think the right to borrow is extremely welcome. You know, we speak to loads of councillors who are desperate to be able to borrow to build council houses because they see it every day. You know, they have families in temporary accommodation, they hear from young families who want a home of their own. So absolutely, we have to be letting councils build to meet their local need. I think we were slightly disappointed with Jeremy Corbyn for creating a bit of a political spat about, is it council houses or is it housing associations? You know, this is a huge challenge which it's imperative we meet. And I think, you know, playing politics with either Conservative obsession with home ownership or Corbyn dislike of housing associations, it's not helpful.
Tim, briefly, borrowing more to build more. Do you support that?
I do. I think we still have a huge deficit. We need to get that under control. But I think there is a difference between borrowing for benefits and schools, for example, and borrowing for the long term, like housing or roads and railways. international borrowing rates are so low at the moment, we'd be foolish, I think, not to take advantage of it. But it's not a Conservative obsession with home ownership.
True.
The vast majority of people want to own their own homes, and so reversing that very sad decline in home ownership should be a legitimate Conservative priority.
OK, thank you.